the live stream. Tell me if it sounds all right at some point. Anybody out there who might be listening? But I will begin with the sponsor, our sponsor for the episode, the hymn number 1 of the Church of the Sledgehammer. Think everything looks bleak, tired of the boot on your neck, if you're sick of waiting for the meek to inherit this wreck, then I have a proposal to make. You're free to say yes or no. I say the next move we take is to gather our forces and go. Cut the wires, climb the walls, or just walk over the hedge. Praise God as your hammer swings. There is no sledge but sledge. The basic task at hand, it's a simple sacrament. Find your nearest combat aircraft and make the biggest dent you can. And then you swing some more from Hawaii to Afghanistan. That's what the church is for. Cut the wires, climb the walls, or just walk over the hedge. Praise God as your hammer swings. There is no sledge but sledge. There are scales we can tip with such a simple device, because a helicopter gunship hit hard once or thrice is a very fragile thing when it's sitting on the ground. Nose cones, jet fighter wings on the bases where they're found. Cut the wires, climb the walls, or just walk over the hedge. Praise God as your hammer swings. There is no sledge but sledge. Our gospel may be simple, but it's based on an underlying theme. It's a church without a temple, but it most certainly has a meme. The power to conquer and divide relies on the fighter jet. With enough folks on our side, let's see how far they get. Cut the wires, climb the walls, or just walk over the hedge. Praise God as your hammer swings. There is no sledge but sledge. Cut the wires, climb the walls, or just walk over the hedge. Praise God as your hammer swings. There is no sledge but sledge. Hello, can you hear everything? Anything? Everything out there in the world? Maybe just give me a heads up. But that's the theme song of the Church of the Sledgehammer, and which is a church I just started a couple weeks ago. It was kind of percolating for a long time, and it's not official. We don't need to be official, or maybe we will be official. But I appointed myself the Reverend Minister of the Sacred Sledgehammer, although there are many other people who really should be better in that role in the church, because they've actually swung sledgehammers, and I just have swung them at rocks. And but there's other folks out there who actually have swung them. And oh, thank you for the feedback. And I'm glad the audio is good, because it's a good mic, and the camera is just the one built into the laptop. I need to learn how to improve that. But we need more ministers for the Church of the Sledgehammer, and the basic idea for the church came a few years ago. Well, basically, I mean, first of all, the predominantly Catholic left originally in the U.S. in the 60s, but also many other folks, both religious and non-religious, have developed a tradition of trespassing onto military bases with things like sledgehammers, pickaxes, and other implements, and then using them to do a lot of damage to nose cones of fighter jets and helicopter gunships and other things, CIA spy bases in New Zealand in one case, to do damage with sledgehammer or pickaxe in many cases is really easy, because these things like helicopter gunships are very fragile when they're on the ground. And so they take their sledgehammers onto the military bases and swing them at things, and then get arrested and go to prison, and occasionally get found not guilty in some cases, depending on the situation, time and place. But yeah, pixelation, that's my camera, I think. But as long as it sounds good and you know that there's somebody here. And I need to figure out a better camera. If I could use my cell phone as the camera and the mic on the laptop, I don't know, somebody can tell me how to do that maybe. But then, so this symbolic action, I was, of the plowshares movement, taking sledgehammers to helicopter gunships on military bases and stuff. It occurred to me through somebody else while I was walking down a road, a little pathway at a little festival some years ago. Somebody who had been at the gig I did the evening before stopped me on the path and said, 10 million people with sledgehammers could change everything. And then I realized, actually, later, when doing some research, that actually it would require far fewer than 10 million, although 10 million would be a nice sort of redundancy to have. But there's only something like 20, depending on how you measure it, like the number of actual combat aircraft on Earth functioning at any given time. It's only in the tens of thousands. And here's a story from Australia, from where Kamala and Paula were there listening at some ungodly hour of the morning. I watched it on the TV. Machine guns fire towards the ground. I watched the people run. Helicopter gunship strafing the street. Watch them lining up the bodies in the Baghdad heat. They say these leaks had consequences. I must agree. When I saw them fire on the children, it affected me. I thought, what if I were wearing the other shoe? If I had a hammer, what would I do? I am just a person like anyone. I am just another mother's son. I have no special powers. I cannot fly, not like that helicopter gunship up in the sky, sending all those bullets all around to the journalists and children on the ground. I am just one man, that's very true. But if I had a hammer, what would I do? Sometimes I try to wonder, why should I care in place? There's a time for watching. There's a time to act. It's just gonna kill more children if it remains intact. I am just one person, but you are too. If you had a hammer, what would you do? If you had a hammer, what would you do? So that's the basic idea is more hammers. And I mean, also, as the crises continue and the protest movements grow and massacres and all sorts of things, the powers that be in trying to deal with such situations, one of the things they do is they get the working class of one country to attack the working class of another, and with fighter jets and helicopter gunships and that sort of thing. And if we just take out all the combat aircraft to begin with, then it kind of levels the playing field quite a bit. And I think Hammer's back in Ireland. You're talking about there were 3 cases one in England, one in Ireland, and one in New Zealand, where folks were found not guilty on it because the things they were swinging there. Well, in the case in New Zealand, it was pickaxes at a CIA spy base in Waihopai, and at Shannon Airport in Ireland, it was sledgehammers, I believe, on U.S. Bombers, and in England, it was, I believe, what was it, combat aircraft that were on their way to be sold to Indonesia to kill Timorese with. And they were all found not guilty. And usually in the U.S. and other countries, they're found guilty, but in these cases, not guilty. Because in all those cases, their countries were not legally participating in the U.S. imperial wars. Yeah, great result indeed. But one of the more recent songs I wrote was after spending a week in Ireland. Oh no, I haven't written any new song for Bernie. No, I should. You could say it started long ago, or keep one lifetime in your sights. People were marching for basic civil rights. Marchers were attacked. The press made wild claims. Anything that happened, Republicans were blamed. The mood that was incited quite intentionally all over the 6 counties in the loyalist community was an atmosphere of hatred, the kind that burns and kills if you live in the wrong house or stand too close to the windowsill. In the pogroms of 1969, with torches, pikes, and guns, neighborhoods were attacked, supported by police if anyone dared fight back. Fight back people did, kept the loyalist mobs at bay. Far more homes would have been destroyed if not for the IRA. Defensive lines were formed as best as could be done. 50 buses hijacked and lit up in the summer sun, surrounding the burned out shells of the houses of Ardoyne, while just beyond them Orangemen sang the Battle of the Boyne. In the pogroms of 1969. Thousands fled the carnage. Hundreds of homes burned down. There was a refugee camp in Dundalk, as big as any town. The British Army invaded the north, started building walls. separating ghettos from the backside to the falls. If you want to understand the world you live in, you have to peel back the layers and look beneath the skin. If you do that, you may find so much of these troubles began half a century after the black and tans. In the pogroms of 1969. You could say it started long ago, or keep one lifetime in your sights. People were marching for basic civil rights. That's a song I wrote a few weeks ago. They're all very related to the Church of the Sledgehammer, but I could keep on making those connections, but they're really quite evident, I think. Sledgehammers takes a lot longer to break down a wall with a sledgehammer, but with enough sledgehammers, behind these prison walls, there's a man who's won awards for the work that he has done and all that it affords, such as the knowledge of the horrors committed in our name. They can't stop the message, so the messenger gets blamed. Behind these prison walls, in solitary confinement, in a land of rolling hills and royalty and other such refinement, is someone who is a hero to whistleblowers everywhere, who helped them tell the world of the crimes of Tony Blair. Behind these prison walls, you will find a mortal man. The reason why we know what happened in Afghanistan, when the soldiers of the empire, whose sun set long before, were torturing civilians in their terror war. Behind these prison walls is a part of WikiLeaks, an eloquent orator, but you won't hear him speak. Locked away in silence, one who knows too well how those in power act when there's another war to sell. Behind these prison walls is one who stands accused of exactly what offenses the U.S. has refused to say precisely which, or to explain how he's not the same as the other journalists. Behind these prison walls is a person they deprive of most of the things in life that keep us all alive. A person being tortured as we stand here now, for revealing the war crimes. Why, when, where, how? Behind these prison walls, our very right to be informed of what the hell is going on is the teacup in this storm. With knowledge there is power, so the solution by the crown. A 24-hour a day, indefinite lockdown behind these prison walls. I'm glad you guys like that song. Sylvian. And Chile, Bolivia, Colombia protests. Yes. Yes. I'll do this one, which is, I mean, well, there's a lot to be said, really, but here, first of all, there's a lot of common threads among the various movements around the world that are happening lately. Of course, protesting austerity is one of them, and protesting the pretense of democracy without any actual power of the people, and protesting against neoliberalism. But one of the common threads among these many protests that are happening is that many of the protesters are not human beings, in fact. And one of the more well-known of the canine protesters in Chile, who likes to play fetch with tear gas canisters, return them to the ranks of the riot police. But there have been other such dogs. Lots of folks are revolting. They've had enough of this shit. The rich are getting richer. They're saying that's it. But with Luke, it's different, that's clear. As he emerges from the fog, let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. It's a fight between people, but he is no pawn. He knows exactly which side he's on. In the machine of capital, he is no cog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. When a smoke bomb comes towards him, he kicks it back at the fuzz. He acts a bit different than a normal dog does. He's got a fan page on Facebook, but he's got no time for a blog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. Let's hear it for Lucanicos, the riot dog. But for other somewhat more serious thoughts on some of these protests that are going on, I mean, of course, there's all kinds of stuff happening. And of course, whenever there's a movement going on anywhere, you can be sure that there are certain forces that are going to be trying to influence it in all sorts of different directions, including lots of very nefarious directions, including elements like the United States, for example. A song about how the DNC uses superdelegates to override democracy. Yes. I've already written songs about that. You need to investigate my back catalog there, and songs about Hillary Clinton. But I don't remember it. She's too boring a subject. But I should write songs about that. That's a good one to write a new song about. That would be a good subject, Ray. It's just also depressing, electoral politics in the United States. It's almost as depressing as a lot of other things that are happening in the world. Chavez was elected. Like every time he ran, when his socialists took power, that's when the changes began. The opposition started attacking every forward move, but reforms went ahead, the people's welfare improved. A land of such riches that had always gone to so few was reaching places ignored since 1492 in Venezuela. Millions poured into the streets to stop the coup back then. They got the man that they elected back into power again. The Bolivarian Revolution became famous worldwide. Soon other socialist governments swept in their red tide. Between the Cuban doctors and the Venezuelan oil, millions got medical care, millions tilled the soil of Venezuela. Bush began the sanctions, Obama imposed more, a slow-burning, destabilizing economic war. Following the formula of the Chicago Boys team, used in many places to make economies scream. Oil prices plummeted, foreign holdings locked, invasions being planned, negotiations blocked in Venezuela. From the Haitian Revolution to Venezuela today, from the Seminoles to Salvador Allende. Look at their ankles, you'll see the chains, imperial vampires, open veins. Those who stand up to the business elite, who cannot stand to see the workers in the driver's seat in Venezuela. In Venezuela. But oh yeah, Patrice Lumumba or Mohamed Mossadegh are both good subjects. Didn't I write something about Mossadegh? I think I did, but I can't remember what. There were a couple, maybe. Yeah, Bernie has a sad tendency of supporting imperialism when it's backed by Democrats. I much prefer, if I'm going to vote for somebody, I wish I lived in England. I'd rather vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, you can't obviously, just suddenly be voting somewhere else very easily, I'm not a citizen or anything, but I'd probably, and it's a tough thing to imagine being a Labour Party activist because you have to end up backing all kinds of Blairites, but at least the leader of the party is really cool. If you travel around Europe today, you'll find society stratified. You'll find an ever-widening political divide. You'll find a growing left and a right that's growing faster, convincing people they're the ones to avert the next disaster. With Jeremy, the BBC ignored him, or they treated him like a clown. Transnational corporations said this man will bring us down. The Blairites in the party stabbed him in the back, and then they did it again. But after each attack, He was steady at the helm, at the job for which he was picked, despite all the accusations. He's an anti-Zionist peacenik who wants to change the country and says the country, I agree with Jeremy. Most members of the parliament wish he'd go away, but as their elected leader, he's set to stay. And when he supports a candidate, they usually tend to win, which makes the Blairites fume while the rest of us just grin. Between the BBC, the Tories, and all the corporate MPs, the tabloid press, the IMF, and all the landed gentry, they're pulling out the stops to stop the ascendancy of I agree with Jeremy. The case before the nation is the one that we all face. What direction now goes this human race? Do we give up on the missiles and tax the rich a lot, or give up on society and just embrace the rot? Among us who would tell us it's the foreigners to blame, not the Blairite Tory billionaires and their rigged neoliberal game. Each day the numbers grow, as each day new people see that they agree with Jeremy. I agree with Jeremy. Yeah, I'm an anarchist too, Liz. But the anarchist vote is what I think mostly when Eugene Victor Debs got 1 million votes from prison. I think that was mostly IWW folks voting at the time, even though they had a official policy of neutrality on voting, I think. But yeah, the anarchist vote in Spain was also quite significant in the elections. But yeah, I'm all for democracy if it's democratic. We just haven't really done that much in the world. You know, when we do, we call it anarchism. Or it approaches anarchism, which then, of course, is mob rule, which then has to be overthrown by the CIA. And then you end up with stuff like London Bridge, and then you got people like Boris Johnson saying the problem is not enough sentencing, which is, yeah, of course, they're going to say that. They haven't even started cleaning up the mess. How many souls departed is anybody's guess. They're already proposing that they turn it up a notch. Time they were imposing an ever tighter watch. Terrorists everywhere, by which they do not mean Norwegians with blonde hair, American Marines, the fighter planes, all of those who die when the bombs rain down from way up in the sky. If you bomb somebody, they might just bomb you back. Pundits on the TV will talk of integration. Most of them agree there's too much immigration. They'll talk of social policies, things they should have done before. Whatever you say, don't mention the war. If you bomb somebody, they might just bomb you back. They'll cry out for more cops and laws against encryption. Time to pull out all the stops of every description. Time to torture suspects, send them back from where they came. Life goes as you'd expect in the imperial game. They'll say that now we must strengthen our will. We mustn't bow down to those we kill, to those we maim, to the countries lost. Don't mention their names or the cost. If you bomb somebody, they might just bomb you back. If you bomb somebody, they might just bomb you back. Yeah. Yeah. Might as well vote until the revolution. But then don't let the voting stop you from the more important forms of organizing. I think that's the main thing. Don't get too distracted by this so-called democratic nonsense. Real democracy is in the streets. Actual change happens in the streets. Actual change in the United States historically happens in the streets. There are other countries that have some kind of democracy where you can actually vote for a left government, and it can then change things in many different ways. That happens. But if we're talking about the United States, if we're talking about the biggest and oldest and most primitive of the Western democracies, then we're talking about a country that is completely corrupt. Democratic change doesn't happen here that way. It happens. That's just a fig leaf. It's just something that you think is happening when you look at the history books because of how they're written. But actually, like all those significant Supreme Court decisions that supposedly changed things, they were all going to happen anyway. They were all happening because of mass movements that forced them to happen. All those changes that happen in terms of laws, presidential administrations, and congresses that passed all kinds of significant laws like medical, Medicare, or Social Security, and minimum wage laws. All that happened because of popular movements. None of that had anything to do with democracy. None of that had anything to do with which party was in power. And if you think it did, then you don't understand American history. Yes, we live in an oligarchy, thus I would say. It's not a dictatorship, but in the sense that there's one dictator, like Nazi Germany was a dictatorship. This is not a dictatorship in the same sense, although maybe it's becoming that. But it is an oligarchy in the sense that Russia is run by oligarchs. The United States is also run by oligarchs. Ukraine is run by oligarchs. There's a lot of oligarchies in the world, but the United States is definitely one of them. And Dave, where? Oh, East Kilbride. Well, of course, we'll just do that song then. We got to do this for somebody actually there in East Kilbride. I almost went to East Kilbride when I was in Glasgow. I actually drove through East Kilbride, but I was trying to figure out where that engine is, because there's an engine, right? There's an engine. One of the engines that the workers at the Rolls-Royce factory refused to repair in East Kilbride is sitting there somewhere, and I want to see where that is. Do I support? Oh, yes, that's the thing. Yes, absolutely, Brendan. Yes, flawed though he is, I definitely support him above any of the other candidates. Although I'm not at all convinced that Elizabeth Warren is so much different from Sanders. And also Andrew Yang is kind of interesting, I think. So really, I would be, from what I've seen of the various field of mostly neoliberal imperialist scum like Biden, I definitely would be much happier with Sanders, Warren, or Yang, personally. If any of them actually got the Democratic nomination, I would actually probably, encourage people to vote for them. I was singing this song in Glasgow actually last week, and somebody who works, I believe, in the Rolls-Royce factory now was saying how, basically he's so proud of, the folks who did the actions that they did in the 70s, but that now, if he was saying now it would be impossible to try to pull something like that. They'd all just get fired, which is an important point. But Labor had more influence back then. Things were more possible. Yang is a libertarian. He wants to do the universal basic income, so that's, I know, but it seems better than what we got now. Actually, way better. Jet fighters bombed the palace. We all watched it on TV. The 11th of September, 1973. All across the world, People cried in vain as we heard stories of the students being tortured and slain. Stories of the workers, shop stewards, and the rest being slaughtered at the new dictator's behest. Labor groups condemned it, said we were on the workers' side, including all the engineers of East Kilbride. People organized a boycott of General Pinochet, who had overthrown Allende with a Hawker Hunter jet. Then a few months later, March of '74, Bob Fulton came to work at the Rolls-Royce factory floor. He looked at the orders that had come in that day and found crates with jet engines from Chile. Jet engines from the Air Force across the ocean wide, sent to be repaired in East Kilbride. It didn't take a minute for Fulton and his mates to come to the decision they would not touch these crates. Soon 4,000 Rolls-Royce workers voted they agreed to stand with the Chileans in their hour of need. Management decried them, the Tories screamed and cussed, but the Hawker Hunter engines were left to sit and rust. Nowhere else on earth were workers qualified to repair the engines sitting there in East Kilbride. It's often hard to know if you've changed anything a whit, but decades later, a Chilean general would admit, for a time in Santiago, there were no fighters in the sky, because the whole Chilean Air Force had not one jet that could fly. They may not have changed the world, this group of union engineers, but these crates of metal sat corroding for 4 years. So here's to British Labour, how for 4 years it tried to do what could be done from East Kilbride. Jet fighters bombed the palace, we all watched it on TV, the 11th of September, 1973. Oh, that's thanks for mentioning the vinyl. It's December. If anybody wants to buy vinyl, I have vinyl and CDs. davidrovics.com/merch. But of course, nobody buys these things anymore. And if you want to support what I do, go to davidrovics.com/subscribe. Paid subscription model is the way to go that people are doing these days. And if you want to hear my next album before anybody else hears it, that's where you'll hear it. And then eventually it'll go up for free on Spotify. Condemned to Freedom. And it has been a pleasure. And no, I mean, it's a very important discussion going on here. It's so true. Once, I mean, the thing is, once the universal basic income, like Yang is talking about, as Muse Bank is saying, like once that gets implemented, then of course landlords can just raise the rent. So it is true, and that's exactly what happened when the minimum wages came around, and during the during as soon as basically in the 1840s with the Industrial Revolution in the United States, one of the best friends of the unions were the landlords, because they knew that that they could suddenly start charging much more rent once the workers got paid better. So obviously there is no solution. The basically universal basic income without all the I agree with you, Muse Bank, and you're not being a jerk at all. And I totally agree. It's without regulation, then universal basic income is useless, because obviously then the landlords can just be rapacious at a higher level and keep us all, living on the sidewalks, because the price point is better that way, like they're doing now. And it has been. No, you're. You can argue. It's okay, Caleb. You guys can. You're having a very reasonable discussion right there. It's good. It's adding to the whole thing. But I'm going to do one more song and take this. You guys can take the discussion offline or somewhere else, and I will call it an hour and go hang out with my babies, and who are now out walking in the cold, so I can have the living room. And thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll see you again sometime soon, somewhere here in a month if you're watching live stream, and elsewhere before. In between now and the next live stream, I'll probably have an album out, actually, so that's very exciting to me, and hopefully to you. Hopefully it's exciting enough to people out there that they want to actually support what I'm doing by going to the CSA link or the subscribe link at davidrovics.com, because the debt far outweighs the savings as a general rule, and it's getting worse. So, but maybe there's hope. As soon as we burn down the mansions. Clown for mayor, kill the rich. Death toll keeps mounting. Each time I turn on my phone, another mass shooting, another free fire zone. The failed states of America, white supremacist rule, a society riven with victims and tools. The fires keep burning, completely out of control. Makes you miss the old days of the ozone hole. The snow is all melting, the lakes of Greenland. The best hope that I have, I hold in my hand. If there's a tomorrow, then when yesterday's through, you have me, and I have you. We might have to leave town, or maybe we'll fall beneath a hail of bullets at the shopping mall. Perhaps we'll be arrested. Perhaps they'll pass us by. But wherever we might be, when we look up at the sky, if there's a tomorrow, then when yesterday's through, you have me, and I have you. Call it natural or made by humankind. We'd like it to be different, but this is the place we find, the one we inherit, the one we're in now. Whatever might come of the future, why, when, how? If there's a tomorrow, then when yesterday's through, you have me, and I have. If there's a tomorrow, then when yesterday's through, you have me, and I have. I have. Thank you so much for listening, everybody out there, and for joining in the conversation and the debate. And oh yeah, I'm sorry. And only just occurs to me, Murray, at the very end here that these conversations are happening on different platforms, which mostly appears to be YouTube. But where I'm seeing it on this Restream website, I am seeing all the different comments coming in on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. But it's mostly YouTube. And yeah, sorry about that. I should have mentioned that a long time ago. And there's actually a website, restreamweb.io, somewhere where I should be giving out at the beginning, where people can actually see all the comments and, interact with everybody on the, stream. Next time, maybe I'll remember to do that. And, but thank you so much for listening, everybody from Australia, Belgium, Scotland, wherever else you've been, US. See you around in the streets and somewhere else, cyberspace.